Illiteracy is a monster. It fosters profound negative emotions and makes even the most intelligent child or adult feel inadequate and have low self-esteem. It restricts the potential and aspirations of talented, gifted people. It breeds anxiety, shame, frustration, anger, and even depression. 85% of young offenders are illiterate. 70% re-offend, but only 16% if they're taught to read. Tragically, 796 million people worldwide are functionally illiterate. That means they can't read well enough to do simple tasks, find a name in a directory, locate a plumber online, read a label on a medicine bottle, follow a recipe, or simply fill in a form. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, the number of people in the US who are functionally illiterate is about 43 million. In the United Kingdom, it's 1 person in 5. In Europe, it's estimated that the figure is about 70 million. Money in billions is being spent worldwide annually to find a solution to this mammoth problem. But improvements are minimal. Who or what is responsible? We blame schools, teachers, parents, dyslexia, ADHD, or poverty for this scandal. But what is the real cause? There are 2 main reading programs used in our schools: systematic and analytic phonics. Systematic or synthetic phonics teaches how to convert letters or letter combinations into sounds and then blend the sounds together to form words. For example, SH sounds like sh, so shop can be read phonetically.
Shop. Shop.
The problem with systematic phonics is that English is only partly phonetic. Different letter combinations can represent the same sound. So, by, by. The same letter combinations can represent different sounds. Cough, bow, dough, 8 and height. We have the confusion of vowel combinations and letters that are silent. Systematic phonics is helpful for decoding words and spelling, but regardless of how it's dressed up, it's only useful as a foundation for reading. Analytic phonics, look and say, or whole word, by contrast, expects students to learn whole words by sight, one at a time. Learners are given picture cues, word shapes, and the first letters of words to encourage guessing. The problem here is that this system caters mainly for students who have a good visual memory, approximately only 10%. Some experts claim that if a child is exposed to good literature, reading will happen automatically, as if by magic. That's impossible. Reading has to be taught at the right time and in a way that's suited to the child's learning style. Over the years, these approaches, combinations and variations of them have been tried and retried, but illiteracy is still at epidemic proportions. Is there a solution?
In 1975, I opened my own Montessori school in Dublin, Ireland. And in 1976, most of the children knew the alphabet and some of them are reading phonetically. In fact, most of the 3-year-olds were reading phonetically. All except one child. I'll call this child Alan. No matter what I did or what I tried, I couldn't get Alan to recognize the alphabet symbols. And I prayed. And one day, in desperation, I drew a head and a tail on the horse and said, Alan, this is a horse. And I put legs on the O and I said, this is an octopus. And then I put a head and a tail on the S and said, this is a snake. The next day, to my absolute amazement, Alan came into the classroom, picked out the 3 sandpaper letters, the Montessori sandpaper letters, and said, this is a horse, this is a snake, and this is an octopus. I was amazed. I said, this is the answer. Alan cannot see the symbols, but he can recognize the shapes. If I could turn all the alphabet letters into pictures, then I'd be able to teach him. And that's what I did. I redid the images over and over again until I got ones that all the children liked. For example, at one point I had C for cat, and they got a bit bored with the cat, and then I made a cup because I saw the shape of the C on the handle.
She would take this, draw a little picture of a cup and see the C on it. So we devised a little song for that, one of us, I can't remember, saying something like, I'm C, that's K, and you'll find me on a cup. I'm C, that's K, you'll find me on a cup. When you drink your tea, you must hold on to C. C, that's K for cup, can you find C?
But the cup was boring, so then I put a clown in the cup, and they were all delighted with the clown, the magic that was in the cup. I made L for lamp and just put like a standard lamp. They didn't like it. And I then changed it to Aladdin's lamp and told the story of Aladdin. The best way to teach any child, or the best way to remember something, is to use songs or rhymes or nursery rhymes. It's a natural way of teaching. I just had the guitar and I would sing a song, and whatever I came to my mind, I would sing it. The ant can do this or something like that. Problem, the children said, sing the song you sang yesterday. But I couldn't, because I couldn't remember what I sang yesterday. So I had to write down the songs.
You and I met first in 1979, I think, shortly after I had joined the Communications Centre. I remember doing the recording and being impressed with the music itself. It was very, very catchy music and probably very appealing to children, and the clever devices used in order to help children with phonetics.
All this very, very nice atmosphere, and then we just take Gertrude, have the guitar, and we'd all be singing all the little songs, and the little children be singing, and before they knew it, it was an effortless transition for them. They didn't even realise they were learning.
Aimed with this alphabet and the songs, I was able to teach all the children to read phonetically within 2 to 3 weeks.
Gertrude had this very simple method that we used, and it was literally just taking a letter and putting a little drawing on it. And for some reason, the children could remember the picture. It wasn't like teaching them, this is A, B, C, D. It was just very simply, oh, I for Indian, and all the different little letters, and it would come to them.
Cot. Cot for babies!
Cot for babies, yes it is.
As a result of that, we figured this was a great idea. Why don't we have the songs published so we can give them to the parents or the children, and they could teach themselves at home, and they loved the songs and stories. In fact, one mother said to me, I think the songs are hypnotic. The children listened to them over and over and over again. They were very simple, but there were little stories attached to them.
Peter went to your school, and he was born in 1975, so he was 4 when he went to you. I remember that. That would have been 1979 then. The thing that I can remember is him saying, G is for girl with the long, long hair, and he used to do that.
Well, I started reading the first year that I was with you. So I would have been reading before the age of 3. And I was reading very fluently by the time I left at age, just before the age of 5, I think. I was reading so fluently actually by the time I went into primary school that my teacher didn't believe that I hadn't learned all the words off by heart.
What happened was that because the younger children were now reading, the parents brought me their older children in the afternoon who couldn't read. My school soon got a reputation for excellence, and Irish National Television, RTE, employed me to write some scripts for a new children's educational television programme. I became a presenter and a scriptwriter for that programme, which was called Bosco.
I launched a programme, created a programme called Bosco. So we took great pride in the presenters that we auditioned and eventually appointed. One of these was Gert Kerrigan. had experience of teaching children of that age, had very much experience of writing for them, of interacting with them. And she, like a lot of the presenters, were involved not only in presenting the programme, but also in contributing.
Also, I was invited to write scripts for Irish radio. I wrote for Knock on the Door and Sing a While, and I was writing many other scripts as well. Because the reading programme was so successful, Jane and I decided we should send it to publishers. I sent it to Veritas, Folens, Fallon's, the Educational Company, Blackwell's, Oxford University Press and Hamlin. We sent the whole programme, which consisted of the alphabet, the cassette, jigsaws, which I had made for it at the time. We had a factory which we were making educational toys. And I also sent the teacher's manual to show how the system worked, and letters such as SH, accompanying, diphthongs put together. So I sent all this to these publishers. Veritas initially said they were going to publish, but then later on said they hadn't got the money to do it. Tom Turley and Folens said, "I'm terribly sorry, but phonics is no longer in use in the schools. They're now using Look and Say. Would you be prepared to write a Look and Say series for us?" So Jane and I took this on, and we wrote a few books, I think 5 or 6 little books like Peter and Jane. But they were so boring. We said, this is absolutely ludicrous. All our children are reading, so why are we using this totally boring system to teach them one word at a time that they have to memorize? And we dispensed with that, and then waited to see if we could get our system published. Sometime later, I got a letter from Oxford University Press to tell me that they were no longer using phonics in the school. They were using what they call analytic phonics, which is actually Look and Say, where you learn one word at a time. Because of this, I decided that it might be better to write a series of scripts based on the alphabet and the whole teaching programme. And I did this and sent it to Peter Woods and BBC. This was about 1980. I didn't hear anything back, which would surprise me, but one morning, my younger son, who was about 5 or 6 at the time, ran into the kitchen to say, "Mum, your programme is on TV." I was delighted. I ran in and yes, my programme is on TV, and I was really delighted, but surprised that Peter Woods hadn't contacted me and said that they had accepted my programme. But my delight was soon shattered, because at the end, my name was not on the programme. There was someone else's name on it. Immediately, I telephoned the BBC to ask how this woman got hold of my scripts and how she was using my TV programmes with her name on them. I couldn't speak to Peter Woods, but I did speak to another number of people who were on the BBC. They said they didn't know anything about it, but they would try and contact Peter Woods. The next thing I was told, Peter Woods retired. I never got my scripts back. And in 1984, I decided to publish the reading system, or at least part of it. I called it Laugh a Number and Laugh a Letter, Visit Numberland, Visit Letterland. And this got a tremendous amount of publicity in the newspapers and radio and all sorts of things, and it was for sale in the shops. And December 86, I decided to move to London. In the January of 1987, I decided I better publish the whole reading system, and I went to a firm of solicitors called McKenna's, and there I met Antonia Plant and Miss Dawson. And when I showed them the material, I said, I want this copyrighted. I have this whole system called Letterland. And they said, well, it's already been published. And I said, yes, I know. I published it in Ireland. I have it here, Visit Letterland, and this is the whole system. And I've even written a TV programme called Letterland. And they said, no, but it's not in your name. And I said, it can't be. I said, you're obviously mistaken. But a couple of days later, Antonia called me and she said, can you come and see us? I went to see them, and she showed me my alphabet with Lynn Wendon's name on it, and Richard Carlyle having written the actual words of the songs and plagiarised many of the letters, and did use the same system where they were now converting letters into pictures. They were making what I did, making a pictographic alphabet. And not alone that, but she had added a cassette of songs based on traditional nursery rhymes, but it was the same idea. Maria Dawson and Antonia Plant suggested that I go and find a copyright solicitor, and they gave me the name of Stevens Innocent. Stevens Innocent wrote to Lynn Wendon and said that she had plagiarised my work and that she was to give it back. And whatever happened, she rang me and she said, oh, this is parallel production development. You can come and work with me, I can help you. I said, I don't need your help. I already have the whole system myself. Why should I need your help? Then I got bad news. The solicitor who was working in Stevens Innocent said, we're really sorry, Lynn Wendon is married to a barrister. She's going to get free legal advice. You have no money. You can't get legal aid for this type of case. We're really sorry. She's got it. You've lost it. I was rapidly running out of money and getting pretty desperate. And on the Sunday after I arrived in the UK, I wandered into St. Stephen's Church in East Twickenham. At the end of the service, I met a lady called Penny Phillips. And Penny started to talk to me and asked what I did. And I said, well, I teach dyslexic children. I could teach almost anybody to read in a couple of weeks. And she started to cry and she said, oh my God, you're an answer to my prayer. I have 2 dyslexic children. As a result, I was working the following morning. I didn't know which of us had the better miracle, Penny or me. And from there, Penny suggested that I contact Richmond Council and show them what I can do. She was amazed at what happened to the 2 children because she'd been having tuition for them for years and it had failed. I did contact the council and I spoke to somebody called Simon Evans, who was the educational psychologist at the time.
I gave her the task of teaching 5 11-year-olds with severe special learning difficulties. They were all regarded as difficult cases, in that, even with skilled additional help, their progress had been slow. The gains are remarkable, given the nature of the teaching course. I noted a significant improvement in their self-confidence and attitude to reading. All the children told me they had enjoyed the course and felt that their reading had been improved by it. They were less anxious and were delighted to be able to read books which interested them, rather than being confined to reading simpler, far duller books.
My son was attending Newland House School, Stuart, my youngest son, and I asked the headmaster if I could do a similar project where I could teach a class and divide the class in 2 and get the best teacher they had, and I would show you how my system worked. Keith Geddes was the headmaster at the time, and he organised this for me, and he organised to get Anthony Glasberg as an independent educational psychologist to assess the children before and after. I think the group that I taught was 11-year-olds, and they took the best teacher, and I had half the children, and I taught them for 2 weeks, 2 hours a day. At the end of the assessment, Anthony Glasberg reassessed the children, and he found out that the children that were taught by the traditional method had only 1 child had increased in reading age by 3 months. But when he assessed my group, taught by my system, the average increase was 3 years. He was astounded. Armed with the psychological assessment from Simon Evans and Anthony Glasberg, I decided to send them to the Daily Mail, to the education correspondent, who was at the time was Stephen Bates. Stephen rang me and asked if I'd be prepared to do a similar project for them, and I gladly agreed. And I taught these 4 children, and they published the results in the Daily Mail, and Stephen said never had they had so many responses. Sadly, each publisher said the same thing. Sorry, we already have Letterland, and they dismissed me. I was devastated. I couldn't explain that Letterland was mine. They wouldn't believe me. It sounded as if I was trying to plagiarise Letterland. And it was after that that a toy company called Pick Toys came on the scene. They obviously weren't aware of Letterland, and they asked me if I could convert the system into a set of games, which I did. So that 1988, I spent several months converting the whole system into game formats. And this was published in 1989. There was a masses of publicity, and again, publishers approached me and dismissed me after they found out. As soon as I showed them the alphabet, they dismissed me and said, sorry, thank you very much, but no thanks, we have Letterland. And then, sadly, about a year or 2 years later, Pick Toys went into liquidation. And I was back where I started. Because I couldn't get my reading programme sold the format it was in, I decided to go back to college the same time as my youngest son was going back to study film and multimedia. I thought this would be a brilliant idea, but Stuart said, please don't come to the same university. So I went to Brunel University and began to study multimedia and film. At the end of this, I was asked to become a lecturer in Brunel, which I did for quite a long time. And then one day the professor chatted to me and he said, you know, that reading system you have is worth far more than anything you can do here in this college. Far more people are in need of a reading system than there are in need of this program that you're teaching here. Anyone can do this, but in fact, it would be better if you spent time developing the reading program. And I decided perhaps that was a good idea. And it was around this time that I met Simon, my husband. And Simon was an artist, and he sort of, with his encouragement, Stuart also qualified in university. And together with Stuart, Simon and I, we decided that we'd redevelop the whole reading system and try and change it so that it didn't look like Letterland. But no matter how we changed it, it still looked like Letterland. We couldn't change, and I couldn't change the basics because that's what the whole system relied on. And Simon and Stuart then decided the best thing you could do possibly is animate the whole system. For Aunt.
Please let me in, she said. There's no room here, said two mice inside.
In an attempt to get this system to the people who desperately need it, Simon and I have tried every possible avenue and failed. I approached the Education Department in the UK. It was rejected because of Letterland. I approached the Department of Education in Ireland. It was rejected because of Letterland. And to my absolute horror, when I was teaching in Pakistan, I was told by the professor of Kinnaird College that they already had Letterland and that they would not, the private sector would not at all consider taking another version of Letterland.
So about 7 years ago, a friend of mine who's a musician got in touch with me and says, I've met this amazing lady who has created this extraordinary system for teaching children to read who are dyslexic. But she's got a problem because someone has stolen her system. Is there anything you can do to help? Well, I've been a copyright lawyer for many years and had done work in television in particular, and thought, well, let's have a look and see if there's a case I can make here. They had sent out a system to a publisher, a system which Gertrude has developed to teach dyslexic children to read, which I thought was a fantastic thing to do. But because this system had been stolen, as they saw it, by the publisher, two things. First of all, they couldn't use the system because other publishers wouldn't pick it up because they said, well, it belongs to someone else. But the other is that the people who'd taken the system didn't fully understand it. So what that meant is that as they developed it, its ability, the system's ability to teach these children to read had been lost because it had been separated from its creator. The law of copyright is very important for all of us because if it didn't exist and it wasn't enforced, then we wouldn't have the music, the books, the films that we all enjoy. And the purpose of the law of copyright is to make sure that people that create music, paintings, films, photographs get paid for what they do. So in this case, what we need to establish is, first of all, that Gert is the owner of the copyright in things like this. An idea in someone's head isn't something which can be protected as copyright. It's got to have two things. First of all, it's got to be original. And secondly, it's got to be written down in permanent form. Now, when those two things happen, the copyright fairy takes her magic wand, touches it, and it becomes protectable in law. The first thing that we have to do is to establish that as a matter of law, Gert is the owner of the copyright in this. And that's a matter of evidence. She doesn't have to do anything. Because in law, the first owner of a copyright work is the person that created it. So we only have to establish that she created it. So in this case, once we've done that, we have to go to the next stage and we have to establish that Lynn Wendon copied that picture of the duck. So what the court does is it looks for evidence of that. Now, if Lynn Wendon's duck is near identical to Gert's duck, and if we can establish that Gert's duck was created before Lynn Wendon's duck, then the court is going to go with us, almost certainly. The court will assume, therefore, that if it is proven that Gert's duck was created, say, in 1975, and Lynn Wendon's duck was created in 1985, that Lynn Wendon's duck was a copy. But the other evidence we normally need to be able to show to a court is that Lynn Wendon had access to Gert's duck. Because if she didn't have access to Gert's duck, it's just possible that her own very similar duck was the product of her own invention. Now, we think we have that evidence, because Gert sent her duck and all the other 25 elements of her alphabet to Hamlin's, to Mr. Carlyle, and it was Mr. Carlyle, we believe, who passed it on to Lynn Wendon. So the first thing I did was to suggest that we speak to a specialist copyright barrister. Now, I'm a media lawyer who does copyright but also does defamation and privacy, so I'm not an out-and-out copyright lawyer. So I wanted to speak to someone who does it 24/7. So we met with him to let him have a really good look at this, see whether there was a viable claim or not. And his view was that there was a viable claim. The major battleground on which copyright disputes are fought starts with who created the intellectual property first. And that is indeed what is being argued about in a response dated August 2013 to a letter which I wrote on behalf of Gert in July of that year, setting out her claim to the company that currently publishes Letterland and to Lynn Wendon. So I have here the letter in response, and the main point that they make is they do not accept that we have evidence of what we call, in copyright terms, prior creation. Our documents start with this, which is Gert's alphabet, which is dated 1975, which she sent actually to Hamlin's, and that's Richard Carlyle and Lynn Wendon, in 1978. So the question is, when can we trace our creation to? Well, the answer to that is we've got this, which we sent in 78. We've got more evidence in the form of Gert's songs, which we have recorded back in 1979. But perhaps even more striking, back in 1975, when Gert was teaching the system, we have teachers, parents and children, all of whom will give evidence that they were being taught Gert's Letterland system back in 1975. Now, we also have this draft script, which Gert sent to RTE. Now, you can't see the date, but I can, so that's December 1978. What we have is plenty of evidence of Gert's creation of the Letterland system back into the 1970s. Now, there is one other important point in this letter, where they say that Gert's claim is what we lawyers call time-barred. Now, a copyright claim has to be brought within 6 years of an offending copy being made. Now, that, of course, only means that we can go back no longer than 6 years about the copies of Letterland, which we say were continuing in 2013. So I don't think they understand the nature of time bar, because for all the last 6 years, from 2013 backwards, we can sue on the copies which were being made during that period. So the claim is not time barred. The second battleground in a copyright dispute is where the defendant, i.e. the person who's accused of copyright infringement, tries to put forward their evidence that they created the intellectual property first. So that's the second part of the letter. So the first problem with the Wendon letter of August 2013 is that it contradicts an earlier letter. So Lynn Wendon herself wrote in 2008 saying that she started to create Letterland in 1976. The problem is that in this letter she claims to have started creating it in 1968. No explanation for the difference. There's another interesting aspect to this, which is that we know that someone, and we presume it's a Wendon, went to the British Library in July 2013 and took material out concerning the Wendon claim and then returned it. Now, the dates are important because my first claim letter to Lynn Wendon was sent in March 2013. So the order is claim letter March 2013, visit to the British Library by the Wendons in July 2013, and what we then discover when we look at the material which is now in the British Library is some very interesting discrepancies. So let me take two of the documents here. Now you can't see it on the camera, but those documents have been stamped as being 1969. The problem is that the British Library stamp is 1985. This is the same problem. It has been stamped apparently not by someone not in the British Library as 69, but the British Library stamp is 1985. Now what is interesting is if you blow up the 1985 stamp, again it's difficult to see on camera, but it very much looks as though someone has tried to blank out the 8 so that it can't be seen, so that the British Library stamp looks as though it's been tampered with. All of that does look a little bit suspicious, and I suspect a judge would be very interested in hearing exactly what happened. As we've established, I actually wrote two letters to, I'm going to call them Team Wendon, making a claim on behalf of Gert. The first was in March 2013, the second was in July 2013, and it was only the second one that I got a response to. So quite often in a copyright dispute, the person who's accused of copyright theft will turn around and say, not only am I not guilty of copyright theft, but actually it's you who's guilty of copyright theft. And that is indeed what this letter says. So at the end of it, it threatens to make a claim against Gert, which of course never happened. And it also asks Gert to confirm in writing that she withdraws and undertakes not to repeat her slanderous and defamatory statements about Mrs. Wendon. Now again, this is someone who doesn't understand the law of defamation, because slander and defamation are not the alternatives. The alternatives are slander and libel. They're both forms of defamation. So this writer doesn't understand his defamation law. Because it's right from the outset been made clear to me by Gert and Simon that this is not a money-making exercise. This is an exercise to release the fantastic system which they were inspired to create, so that it can be used for what it was always meant to do, to teach dyslexic children all the way around the world to read.
I want to talk to you about the worldwide problem of illiteracy. A number of years ago, I was asked by an adult training college in the UK to teach two teenagers to read and write. These teenagers were attending a course which was to try and get them off benefits, but because they couldn't read and write, they couldn't do anything with them. Katie was 18, Ian 16. Katie came to me and I asked Katie, she had studs in her nose and her lips and her hair covered half her face. She was dressed in black. Ian shuffled in, bowed down, and neither of them met my eyes. I asked Katie what she did all day. She said, I do nothing. I walk around. I can't read the road signs. I don't know what's on the cinema. I don't know what's on the television. I just do nothing. Ian jumped up and said, Miss, you know, not being able to read is worse than prison. You never get out. Anyone can learn to use it. If we could teach people to use this, you teach one, you teach one, you teach one, you teach one, we could solve the problem. The governments can't do it, the teachers can't do it, the schools can do it, but together we could. Thank you for listening.
You know, Gert has done something that so many people have tried to do but fail. And she uses music to engage in pictures because that uses both sides of our brain. And it's just brilliant. And hearing the stories she tells about the kids she's helped learn to read when they couldn't before, it's just really amazing. And I think there's, you know, illiteracy is such a big problem in our world. And to have something that is so repeatable and usable all over, I mean, we just need more Gerts out there. And I think she could train us to do that, and I'm in.
Wow, Gert was really inspiring. She's so creative to take, you know, pictures and words and letters and make animals out of them just so the kids can learn how to read. It's just fascinating that the learning process can be done in such a short time. She's fabulous. I really enjoyed her talk.
What Ms. Garrow just explained tonight is a fact of reality. I'm 70 years old. I've worked and I've struggled. I have a PhD. But I had to learn how to read without phonics. I had to learn how to memorize. And it's been an ongoing struggle. People do not believe that this actually exists. The year that my sister started school was the last year that they taught phonics in Baltimore City. I joined a year later, and they have stopped phonics and gone to a memory system. And I tell you, that system does not work. And I thank her for bringing this to the forefront and showing us how we can reverse it.
What Lynn Wendon and Richard Carlisle have done, they have deprived millions of people of the ability to read. 85% of young offenders are illiterate. 70% reoffend because they can't read. 16% if taught to read. They have deprived so many people. For 40 years, they boast about the money they made and how they've sold all over the world. Now they should repent and apologize to those people whose lives they have destroyed. And that's why I still continue to try and bring about some way of getting this system to the people who need it.
There is a solution that can end the illiteracy epidemic once and for all. The plagiarized reading system created by Letterland and Letterland International is in 111 countries. The governments of each of these countries, whose schools and parents use the program, should eliminate this flawed Letterland reading system that fails and replace it with Gert's A to Z reading system that works. Nationwide, there should be a mainstream alternative and social media campaign where Gert can demonstrate how easy it is to teach anyone to read.